Who wounded Bjorn the Fell-Handed enough that he had to be put into the Dreadnought body? How did his mind find the strength to carry on when his body was so broken? What's special about this Dreadnought form? Friends, let's find out, and welcome to another 40k video. Drawing on the audio-only story Parting of the Ways by Chris Wright. Bjorn fights alongside the root of Fenris on Morelian. He was surrounded by the slain. His own armour was scarred by battle. He saw towers devoted to the dark gods. The great wolf of the space wolves focused on the beast that had slain so many of his battle brothers. It squatted amidst towers, spewing filth waiting for him. It was bloated with power. It was an immense beast of chaos, filled with warp essence that bled from every inflamed pore. Its hide shimmered like oil, changing and mutating over and again. Its body was a beast spilling across the ground around it. Bjorn cried for us. The beast reared above him, its hide opening up, showing teeth and claws. Bjorn aimed his weapon at the wounds his brothers had already cut into its flesh. He hacked with fury. The creature reared as its body was cut up. Bjorn worked inward, aiming at whatever unnatural organs were revealed. In response, the beast drew on the corruption at its heart, and the ground shook. More tentacles and spikes wrapped around his limbs. It attacked with hooks, mauls, flails. He cut down what came at him, and its movements became frantic, but in turn it gashed his body, breaking. Ceramite. He howled with the renewal of his killing urge. Blood from both mingled. Bjorn laughed as he felt his body torn apart. As he did, yet more damage to the beast, and he made it to its now exposed, glowing innards. His legs fell out from under him, but he still swung with his lightning claw at the warp matter rearing over him. His claw bit deep, and it screamed. It crashed and flailed, twisted and turned, and it began to burn away before him. As it was run back into the warp, Bjorn collapsed, and only then felt the true scale of what was done to him. He was slain, he felt, but he had also slain the beast in turn. His vision swam with blood, and the last of his armour systems failed. He hears landers, but they were too late, and he would die as a warrior, a worthy end, which he judged to be worth a saga, and he smiled with broken fangs, and says weakly, "For us." He's found, and we are told he had led them for 3 centuries, the wolves, and kept them together after Russ had disappeared. The brothers gathered, whispered that he was the soul of the chapter. He could not die. Winterclaw ensures he is taken away safely, and he is kept alive at this point by machine alone. Winterclaw measured the life signs and sees that the mind of Bjorn is not yet gone, and his body is carried away to the Fang on Fenris, though he dies twice on the way. Bjorn was taken into the Fleshmaker's laboratories, and there Winterclaw operated. He says that Bjorn will lose his legs, right arm and stomach, that he is on the edge. Without his armour, what was left of Bjorn, what this creature had done to him, was a pulpy, gory mess, flecked with broken bone. His heart's laboured. Winterclaw's machines breathed for him. As he heals a wound within the body of Bjorn, the Rune Priest Calgrim watched on, and suggests the idea of the Dreadnought. And Calgrim says the Blademaker has the vessel ready. Calgrim says if he is preserved, that the root would follow Bjorn into the warp itself. Winterclaw says, what about his mind? What if that breaks? And alarms flash around the body of Bjorn. Calgrim leans over the body and says, he must live. Winterclaw cuts into the torso, then begins to saw into Bjorn's body, and sees the mess within. And at that point he agrees that the great wolf will be interred. The Rune Priest Calgrim agrees. The body of Bjorn is then taken deep into the Fang, to the Deep Forgers and the Blademaker, who waits for him. The Blademaker's arm was dark and pitch, and covered with servo arms. Heavy machines from the dawn of the Imperial Age growled with power, and Bjorn's casket was drawn up before the Blademaker, who would reshape and reform the broken corpse. Slegic says he can be saved. Slegic, by the way, is the Blademaker, and a chasm yawned behind him, and Slagic congratulates Winterclaw on saving Bjorn, and the servants of the Machine Maker begin to intone archaic words of appeasement to the gods of the machine, of the anvil, of the angry world's heart. Then the chasm and the engines come to life, and something began to rise, and the outline of a Dreadnought chassis emerged from the shaft. It was massive, a hunk of adamantium and ceramite, blocky, angular, and doggedly indestructible. It was superlative, as Slagic had promised. Its front panels were covered with gold images, a rearing wolf, a hawk of lightning, all in fine knotwork tracery, the equal of any ancient Slayer King's barrow. It was the pinnacle of the iron worker's art. Winterclaw recognised that nothing of this type would ever be made again. This was the last of the machines laid down from before the law of Mars had begun to fade, and when Slagic passed there would be none to rival it, and there they watched as the interment machine placed within that fearsome hulk the body of Bjorn. Then more machinery was brought to add to the outside of the machine. One was a claw of long talons that glinted eerily, as if itching to flex. We are told it's no ordinary claw. It was the great wolf's weapon, the weapon of the Space Wolf's Primarch, Lehman Russ. The body of Bjorn would now be fused to the reactor power heart of a Dreadnought. The interment took 5 days. Then the Blademaker summons Winterclaw and Slagic. They gathered before the sarcophagus of Bjorn. The weapon's arms had now been attached, but it stood inert. No lights flickered around its flanks. No smoke coughed from the twin stacks. The Blademaster says he does not know if Bjorn lives, that the mind impulse unit is dormant, and the Blade Master gestured, and the Dreadnought systems came to life. The hiss of a piston gave way to the grind of servos, followed by the judder of the power coils. Winterclaw, who knew Bjorn of old, waited, and the Dreadnought remained stationary. Then the hair on his arms became prickly. There was a swell of energy inside the sarcophagus. The dreams were long and terrible. Everything had been cold, and a deeper cold than even Fenris could bring. And this moved down through the bones and into the mind, clawing and making it listless. And in the dream, Bjorn was focused on the past, how Russ had left him behind, how he had searched but not found him, and how, seeing them split, he stepped up to take the place as leader of the Root, and Russell's final word to him, "Not you." And he felt his eyes open, the lids scraping over the white, except there were no eyes. He opened his mouth to scream, but there was no mouth, just agony burning through the veins that he still possessed. He clenched a fist, and something that was not his fist moved. It was heavy as bars of adamantium. A veil lifted, and colours and sensations came rushing back. He screamed again, and a machine roar shocked him. It echoed around him. He tried to move an arm or limb, and felt the world around him heavy with inertia, and he wondered if he had died. And this was the Underverse, and the colours before him resolved, and he saw 3 lords of Fenris. He thought they might be the judges of the slain, who were there to take him to Russ's side. They all bowed, and he remembered the beast, and what it had done to him, how it had ruined his body. And then he knew a face amongst these lords, Winterclaw, who says, "You are returned to us, Lord." And then Bjorn understood. He flexed muscles and felt fibre bundles twitch. He turned his head and felt the weight of slabbed shoulders. His sights were mediated by targeting systems for weapons, and the weapons were not part of him, they were him. Many around him, workers for the Forge Master, chanted. They laid down weapons ready to offer their fealty, and he understood. It was his fury and grief that had let him cling to life. They had brought him back. Russ had once said he could not see Bjorn's fate, so I decided it by leaving him and locking him into being head of the chapter. This is eternal came from the Dreadnought, Vox, and he felt the power of the Dreadnought flood through him. And Bjorn thinks, I can never leave, I can never follow him. Speaking of Russ, of course. Those around him now shouted out his titles, the Fell-Handed, the Great Wolf, and they were devoted to him in a way they were not even to the Primarch. He had not been born on Fenris, and was more god to them than Jarl. This is eternal, Russ says, and the gathered cheered, and Bjorn pulled back his head, opened up his new Vox throat, and howled. And on that triumphant note, the rebirth of Bjorn the Fell-Handed, one of my favourite 40k characters, probably my favourite Space Wolf character, and certainly the best known Dreadnought, will wrap up today's video. What do you think to how Bjorn survived? Would you like to know more about the creature he fought and how he got there? Have you been interred into a Dreadnought? Vox loud, friend.